Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Krista Holloman, a digital reporter here at News 10. We're going to take you to Lansing, where Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel is announcing charges in the investigation of fraudulent petition signatures in the 2022 Michigan gubernatorial election.
Who is handling the case, Chris Kessel, and Aubrey Sargent, who's our chief of our investigations division. In Michigan, candidates for state and federal office must submit a sufficient number of valid signatures of registered voters in the state or in the county or district to the Bureau of Elections and within the Michigan Department of State. Now, this measure requires candidates to demonstrate that they have a significant base of support, as evidenced by their ability to obtain the number of voters who support their candidacy, and the grassroots support to collect the number of signatures, or the financial support to contract a business to do so for them. And this is no small undertaking, nor is it really meant to be. It often requires a good deal of money to pay field staff or a service provider to collect signatures, and just as importantly, to validate the authenticity of the collected signatures. In this way, Michigan limits the field of candidates for our elected offices to only those with demonstrated broad support and the capacity to win, and this is especially important for a statewide office, and in this case, the highest constitutional officer in the state of Michigan. During the 2022 election cycle, the bar was set at 15,000 valid signatures in order to qualify for the ballot for a statewide office. And that was a recent reduction from the previous threshold, which had been 30,000. And you might remember in the Chris Gravelin case from the 2018 election cycle, there was a challenge, and it was reduced from 30,000 to 15,000. Not everyone remembers that, but I do. So for the circuit and probate courts in Wayne and Oakland counties, the threshold is 4,000 signatures. So to this end, most campaigns will seek and contract with vendors, business entities that serve as experts on signature collection and validation to fulfill this essential function. And these business entities take on the work for large sums of money paid by campaigns because it's hard to do. It requires a large operation, an oversight, and a niche and specialized expertise is needed to assure that the signatures are valid and numerous enough to satisfy the ballot eligibility requirements. When those who operate these businesses pervert the process and commit outright fraud and forgery, and in doing so swindle their clients out of tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars, these bad actors must be held accountable, and the criminal penalties should be significant. So what we're here to announce is that under arrest and arrested yesterday are Shawn Wilmoth and Jamie Wilmoth, who were arrested yesterday. They will be arraigned before the 37th District Court today at 1 p.m. The third defendant, Willie Reed, has not yet been taken into custody, but the U.S. Marshals are out there looking for him. Strongly suggest to Mr. Reed that he turn himself in as quickly as possible. And I will say this, it will likely affect the conditions of his bond if he does not turn himself in. I assume with all the publicity on this, he knows at this point that he's a wanted man. So the accusations are that for these three individuals, that they defrauded the gubernatorial campaigns of Perry Johnson, James Craig, Donna Brandenburg, Michael Brown, Ryan Kelly, and Michael Markey, as well as judicial candidates Tricia Dare, John Cahalan, and John Michael Malone. Now, the charges allege that Shawn Wilmoth and Jamie Wilmoth Gooden and also Willie Reed committed crimes as part of a criminal conspiracy. And they will each face 8 counts of false pretenses, 8 counts of use of a computer to commit a crime, 8 counts of election law fraud, and 1 count of conducting a criminal enterprise. Shawn Wilmoth and Willie Reed will each additionally face 1 count of larceny by conversion and another count of using a computer to commit a crime. Shawn Wilmoth also will be charged as a habitual offender, a habitual third. So we believe these defendants conducted a criminal enterprise via 3 business entities: First Choice LLC, Mac Douglas LLC, and Petitions Reed LLC, which the defendants either owned or worked for. The defendants presented these businesses as providing legitimate signature gathering services for political campaigns. In reality, the defendants, through their companies, knowingly and falsely misrepresented their ability and ultimately their efforts to deliver nominating petition signatures for 9 Michigan campaigns who paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for petitions with guaranteed valid voter signatures. What they actually received, though, were hundreds of petitions chock full of thousands of fraudulent signatures, signatures the defendants knew to be fraudulent. Now, these signatures ran the gamut from merely suspicious-looking to flagrant forgeries. And despite the obvious deficiencies in the petitions, the defendants still delivered them to the candidates, knowing that they were going to be submitted to the Michigan Bureau of Elections. And as a direct result of this fraud, 7 of the candidates were disqualified from the ballot. One of the candidates discovered the fraud and decided not to submit them to the Bureau of Elections at all. Our investigation has identified over $700,000 in payments from the 9 campaigns that were paid to these entities for signature collection and verification purposes. In most cases, with the explicit expectation and in guarantee of specified validity rates. Now, the allegations are that Shawn Wilmoth, Jamie Wilmoth Gooden, and Willie Reed knowingly and intentionally deceived their clients, took their money, provided fabricated petition signatures, and delivered them as the quality product of their companies. In doing so, they eliminated their clients' campaign prospects for public office, and in doing so, denied Michigan voters the ability or opportunity to vote for any of these candidates, some of whom had been campaigning for over a year for these positions. In the end, the actions of the defendants cost 5 gubernatorial candidates their shot at the ballot as they sought the Republican nomination for governor of the state of Michigan. And likewise, it cost 3 nonpartisan judicial candidates their ability to appear on the ballot in Oakland and Wayne counties. 7 of these candidates were disqualified from the August 2022 primary ballot due to insufficient signatures. The 9th candidate, a 6th candidate for governor, Ryan Kelly, was also a victim. And after paying the defendants $15,000, he received absolutely nothing for his money, 0 signatures, in fact. While certainly the candidates who were deceived and subjected to fraud were victims of the defendants' greed, so too were millions of registered Michigan voters, whether they ultimately cast their ballot in the August Republican primary or not. And yes, many of these are financial crimes we're talking about today, but they're also crimes against our democracy and against the integrity of our system of elections and against those voters who may have wanted to support these prospective candidates. Our investigation began when the Michigan Department of State referred this case to my department. The Bureau of Elections received thousands of signatures from the victim campaigns and quickly concluded that the signatures were fraudulent. As highlighted by both national and state media, you see here an example of some of the obvious fraud that the Bureau found based on the handwriting samples. Other types of obvious fraud that were identified include misspelled names, misspelled cities, similar ink patterns, repeated scribbled signatures, address errors, voters who had moved, and sometimes even the signatures of deceased voters. The Department of State referred the matter to the Department of Attorney General and began our investigation in June of 2022. Now, throughout the course of our investigation, we spoke with candidates and representatives of their campaigns, business associates or employees of the three defendants, and experts in the field of signature gathering efforts and election processes. The evidence very clearly demonstrates that defendants Wilmoth, Gooden, and Reed were all aware of and directly responsible for the forged work product provided to the campaigns, which they knew would ultimately be filed with the Michigan Department of State and the Bureau of Elections. The signatures contained on many of the petitions were obvious forgeries. The methods used to disguise their con were sophomoric and transparent. Still, we can take comfort and have faith in the security and integrity of our elections, knowing that the Bureau of Elections so quickly and easily detected the fraud. And while it was certainly unfortunate for the candidates who were taken advantage of, these petitions were appropriately and summarily rejected. And the law enforcement agencies we partnered with, and now through the hard work of our investigators, our prosecutors, and the law enforcement agencies we partnered with to secure their arrests, I am very confident these defendants will be held accountable for their actions and that they are likely to pay a very steep price for the crimes that are alleged. And with that, I'd like to thank my investigators on the case. I'd like to thank especially Bob Lalone and former Special Agent Pete Ackerley, who worked tirelessly on this case. I'd really like to thank Gallant Fish, who was our assigned assistant AG, can't be here today because he's on paternity leave, and also Chris Kessel, who will be our trial attorney on this. And I want to thank also the Warren Police Department, whose officers apprehended Shawn Wilmoth and Jamie Wilmoth Gooden, and also like to thank the U.S. Marshals, who again are working expeditiously to locate Willie Reed. And when he is located, we will begin the process of extraditing him here to Michigan. We hope to have that happen in short order. Before I wrap this up, I'd really like to take a moment to caution prospective political candidates and their staff. Please, vet your vendors. Look into the people in campaigns you are trusting with the vital elements of your campaign and with the many thousands of dollars you and your donors have pledged and spent. While there are many legitimate businesses and consultants, there are also bad actors, criminals, and fraudsters in any and every arena where large sums of money are being quickly spent. Political campaigns, as public and regulated as they may be, are no exception, and the charges we are discussing here today should be a clear warning sign to all who seek these services, either as a candidate, as a consultant, or a proponent of a ballot proposal. You must take the necessary time and effort to do your due diligence and research these firms and speak to candidates or consultants that they've previously worked for. And I very much believe had the victims in these cases or their campaigns properly vetted these vendors, they likely never would have hired these defendants or their firms in the first place. So know who you are trusting with your money, your reputation, and with your political future. Further, I believe that Michigan should view this as a cautionary tale as to why we need better and stronger laws on the books as it pertains to signature collection for candidates or for ballot proposals. Now, other states require petition signature gatherers to be registered voters in that state. Some preclude people with previous convictions from acting as canvassers, certainly if they've been convicted of an offense that involves fraud or forgery or election law violations. We might also want to consider requiring canvassers to be registered with the state or that signature collection firms be licensed and bonded. There are things that we can do. Now, I've had the opportunity to discuss these generalized concerns with the Secretary of State, Jocelyn Menson, with Senator Jeremy Moss, chair of the Elections and Ethics Committee in the Senate, as well as with Representatives Aaron Burns and Penelope Cerniglu, who chair these committees in the House. And I can tell you that each of these officials is open to and very interested in legislation which would help protect our state from illegal activities like those that are alleged in this case. And we should be making every effort to learn from this investigation in order to ensure this never happens again, or at least to make it much more difficult for bad actors to operate in our state. A free and fair election is predicated on everyone involved knowing the rules, and that clearly did not happen in this set of circumstances, at least as it pertains to the actions of the three defendants that were charged here today. So hopefully, obviously, these individuals are held accountable, but also hopefully the state of Michigan will make efforts to ensure that nothing like this ever occurs again. And with that, I'm happy to take questions. If someone else can, I don't want to be the. Go ahead.
Madam Attorney General, do you, one, believe this was deliberate? And two, can you explain how or what your investigators discovered in terms of the way this was accomplished? In other words, were they sitting at a kitchen table and just writing stuff out? Or did they have people doing that? What do we know?
Well, when you say whether or not it's deliberate, I will say this. It's not just that when it came to the final product, we believe that these defendants absolutely knew that they were submitting forgeries to these campaigns, but we believe that they should have known when they took these clients on in the first place that what they were vowing to do, what they had contracted for, was a virtual impossibility. And let me say it from this perspective. Here you have 5 candidates for the office of governor. A prospective signator, somebody who wants to sign those petitions, can only sign one. So how are you going to get, I mean, that's an enormous number of individuals that you have to find. And with ballot proposals, and you know, we've seen this regularly. I saw it certainly in the 2022 election. You might have a person who's gathering signatures for ballot proposals carry 5 different proposals. And they can do that. And they can have one person sign all 3, 4, 5, 6 of those. And there's nothing illegal about that. However, when you're talking about a candidate for governor or any other office, that one person can only pick one. They can only sign one of those. And these firms had to know that when they were taking these clients on. And what we allege and what we believe happened is that, you know, this was just irresistible to people who wanted to commit fraud, because we had gotten to the point where these signature collection firms were, you know, being paid $9, $10, $11, $12 per signature. And then again, there's nothing that stops these signature collection firms from actually hiring people that are convicted felons who really are incentivized at that point, right? You have every incentive to get as many signatures as possible. And then, of course, you have to have a really thorough vetting process when it comes to ensuring the validity of these signatures. And it is, you know, our belief, and it is alleged, that these 3 individuals absolutely knew that what they were receiving were forged signatures, that they encouraged that to happen, and that they made no effort to warn the campaigns or to eliminate those signatures which they knew to be fraudulent before they passed them along to the campaigns, knowing exactly what the campaigns were going to do with them, which was, of course, to submit them to the Bureau of Elections.
Sure. Do you believe
Well, we're not ruling that out, and the investigation is ongoing. These are the three principal actors, right? These are the folks that got paid the big bucks. These are the ones that orchestrated everything. There certainly are lesser offenders who also committed crimes, and our investigation has not concluded, and it may well be that some of those individuals are charged, and some of them may serve as witnesses in this case. But we thought what was really important, because these signature collection firms that are the bad actors, they often they'll go from state to state. They will frequently dissolve whatever their entity is, and then reform as a new entity. And before we get into a new election cycle, we thought it was very important that, first of all, we get the principal actors charged. And secondly, to be honest with you, and I see Rep. Cernoglu is here with us today, to make sure that we're putting the laws into place so that we know this can't happen again. And we want that to happen sooner rather than later. So yes, we could have waited until we had, charged and apprehended every single one of the, the signature collectors. But we thought it was most important that we conclude the investigation as it pertained to the worst actors, who, but for them, none of this would have occurred.
Rick? Do you think that all three of these people are Michigan residents? And by talking about the U.S. Marshals, we assume Mr. Reed you anticipated is not in the state?
That's correct.
But they all three are from Michigan.
Well, two of them are from Michigan, right? Two of them live in Michigan.
Okay.
We were told that the Attorney General's office or Secretary of State knew there were problems with the signatures since March, and personally I didn't find out about it till May 23. I'm concerned that there was an advance notice, not just for the candidates, because we could have collected different signatures if the Secretary of State's office had acted quicker, because it's a threat to national security. And I'd like to know in the future, will there be any notifications so that it wasn't just against the candidates, it was against all the Michigan voters for not finding out about this soon enough. And I was pretty much ambushed, because even the rule of law wasn't followed. There was no charges or anything, and I'd like to know how that's going to be handled in the future, so that there's no more people that are victimized by this type of thing.
Well, I honestly think that would have to be a question for the Michigan Department of State and the Bureau of Elections. We don't even get this until it's referred to our office as a criminal investigation. So we received it in June of 2022. So any of those questions would have to be directed at MDOS or at BOE.
Did you also review some of the signatures for the petitions that were submitted? I know some of the groups that didn't end up submitting their petitions said that they could use this same group to collect signatures. Why weren't those considered in this investigation?
I'm sorry, Beth. I don't think I'm completely understanding your question. Could you rephrase it maybe?
Yeah, so there were a couple of proposals related to like voting rights, and I can't remember the other one, but they said they could also use this same signature collector for theirs. They had received fraudulent signatures from them. They ended up not submitting their signatures to the Secretary of State. Did they submit any signatures or complaints to you in that regard?
We didn't receive any complaints, but let me say this. We believe that the evidence will show that there were ample opportunities in terms of other campaigns, knowing that these particular defendants and their companies were submitting signatures that, to, I guess, quote one witness, were garbage. What happened is that some of the candidates and their campaign committees just decided not to use them at all and did not submit them because they knew there was an issue with them. I would say that there were probably some, and this is my speculation, but you can confirm this by talking to the candidates and their committees. I think that some candidates were sort of under the gun in that they didn't have much time and they just had to get these submitted as quickly as possible, and perhaps didn't take the time, maybe they didn't have the time to properly vet them, to ensure that there were no issues, no forgeries, no suspicious signatures, and others didn't have that at that time and just took these defendants at their word. And again, the guarantee that was made was that 70% of these are going to be accurate. And I think the contracts will be a part of the evidence in this case. But you take a vendor at their word that 70% of those are going to be accurate, and that seemingly is what some of these candidates did. But others did take the time to review. And I think the evidence is going to show that there was, in fact, one judicial candidate that just did not submit their signatures at all and just decided, well, I guess I'm not going to be on the ballot because it was so clear that there were some forgeries.
Yes. Sorry, all the way back here. Myers, CBS News Detroit. I'm curious if there is any sort of financial restitution. Are these candidates going to get any of this money back, or is it off with the wind?
So in every single case where we have victims who suffer financially and suffer financial losses, we always ask for restitution to be part of any sentence. And we will do so again here in the event that we receive convictions.
Two questions tied together. If the candidates had vetted these particular companies in advance, what would they have found? And also, what did these people spend the money on after they got it?
Well, firstly, I can't answer as to how the defendants spent their, what I would call, ill-gotten gains. But I will say that, yes, it is our belief that the way that some of these campaigns reviewed the signatures and saw that there were obvious forgeries, that had all the campaigns had the opportunity to do that, they probably would have seen the same thing. I can't speak for whoever was working on those campaigns and whoever was conducting that review. All I can say is that it was apparently obvious to the BOE and obvious to our department when we looked at these signatures that there were many, many forgeries involved.
May I just follow up? Then what would the candidates have seen had they properly vetted? In other words, were there criminal convictions? Had they had problems in other states?
I think that just Googling some of these individuals, you would have seen things pop up from other states. One individual is charged as a habitual offender for election law violations in another state. So in some of these instances, I think it would have been quite easy to ascertain that this was probably not a good choice for somebody who was, charged with this incredibly important responsibility. Again, there are so many different people that you hire during the course of a campaign, especially a statewide candidate. I would say one of the most important is whoever is collecting your signatures, because without them, you're not going to make it on the ballot in the first place.
Eric?
Now, I'm sure this isn't the first election this has happened, but it hit like 5 different candidates, 9 total candidates across the board. Is there a reason why now it's more recognized, or is hit so hard? Is the BOE doing a different sort of process to find these, or was it just because we had so many candidates they got desperate?
Honestly, I have my suspicions. This is speculation, but I will go ahead and speculate anyway. We had a lot of candidates running for office, especially when you look at the number of individuals that were running for governor on the Republican side. And in all honestly, the number of people who had never run for office before. And there are some lessons learned, I think, by folks once they've run for office a couple times or even once, and you learn things that you really need to be careful about or concerns. And I think, honestly, just a lot of these candidates got taken because they were political neophytes and they had never done this before. And I think some of them probably relied on consultants they had hired who may have failed them. And others perhaps were just in a real rush to get these signatures in so that they could appear on the ballot. But I think that part of the reason that you're seeing so much fraud is because you had so many candidates that were running in the first place, and again, so many candidates that didn't have the experience to know differently. And I think perhaps cause and effect, maybe that's one of the reasons why it got so expensive per signature. I had never seen, signatures that, were so expensive. And so I think it incentivizes the fraud because there's a lot of money to be made when you are charging that much money per signature. So I think it was sort of the perfect storm for all of this to occur.
All right, is our last question, Jonathan? Thank you.
Sure, just a couple of quick detail questions. What's the relationship between Shawn and Jamie, and then they share as part of the last name? And then what are the maximum sentences these defendants face? Shawn as a habitual offender, assuming one or something?
Yeah, so firstly, Shawn and Jamie are married. Secondly, yes, anytime you have a habitual offender, the amount of time that you can do is increased as a result of that. In terms of the specific offenses and what the penalties are, let me review them.
I think there's 27. So.
Yeah, I know, but a lot of them are multiple. So, all right. Firstly, conducting a criminal enterprise is a 20-year felony. False pretenses, 100,000 or more, is a 20-year felony. False pretenses between 50 to 100,000 is a 15-year felony. False pretenses between $20,000 to $50,000 also a 15-year felony. Let's see. Using a computer to commit a crime is a 10-year. It's a 10-year felony, and that can be served. That can be served consecutive. It's not mandatory that it be consecutive. It's discretionary with the court. Election law forgery. It's 5-year, right? 5-year. Larceny by conversion. Also a 5-year. What have I missed? All right, that's everything. Great.
So with the consecutive, the maximum would be 30 years.
Well, it's not mandatory that it's consecutive. It's up to the judge's discretion. Yeah. Yeah, but each count can be consecutive to the other counts that run concurrently.
I just have one last short detailed question. You mentioned earlier 2 of the defendants are Michigan residents. I just wanted to confirm that is Jamie Wilmoth and Shawn Wilmoth.
Correct.
And Mr. Reed is not a Michigan resident.
That's my understanding.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much, everybody.
Yes. We have hard copy questions about this door closed.
You're actually doing the honest thing.
All right, as you saw there, a list of signatures that appear to be fraudulent in the gubernatorial ballot for the 2022 Michigan governor's election. Our Riley Connell was there, and she's going to have more on this coming up in a little bit on News 10 at 5 p.m. Thanks for watching.